Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance in the Crawlspace studios in Wormtown. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Tim. It feels good to be in the Crawlspace studios. It feels good to be in 2019, not 1976 New York.
Yeah, well, so in this episode, we talked to old friend and now six-time Crawlspace guest, Mike Morford, the true crime guy, the co-host of Criminology and The Murder in My Family. And so he comes on to talk about David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, Mr. Murder, the 44 caliber D-bag, David Berkowitz. So Mike Morford, his show Criminology, they did a 3-part series on the son of Sam, and so check that out on Criminology. And again, Mike Morford, he's an old friend of ours. We love him, and he's coming to the American Crime Festival, Lance.
Yeah, I mean, we would like nothing better than to go, 4 or 5 months without having him on?
We can't.
But we can't. No, I'm just kidding. We love having him on because he has so much information about iconic figures in serial killer and in American crime history. And David Berkowitz I think he said that he was like number 1 or 2 when it comes to how fascinating the psychology is with this guy. And we really got into some stuff with this interview that I didn't think we were going to go down, like the conspiracy theory that there was a group of people responsible for this and not just one man. So that was really interesting. And you just brought up the American Crime Fest. So we needed to bring him on to, make sure people remember what his voice sounds like and how much knowledge this guy has and what he's going to bring to the table on November 8th, 9th, and 10th.
That's right, in Wildwood, New Jersey. Right there on the ocean, Lance. We're going to Wildwood, New Jersey, the American Crime Festival, November 8th, 9th, and 10th. It is going to be a blast. We have Mike Morford. He's going to be a part of a panel that is called How to Create and Maintain a Popular Crime Podcast. And Lance, do you know who else is going to sit on this panel with Mike?
Why don't you tell me? Fill me in.
This is a treat. Well, Captain from True Crime Garage is going to be there. He's all thrilled about it. We've got Marissa Jones from the Vanished podcast who's going to be a part of it, who is just a superstar in her own right. And we've got Josh Hallmark from True Crime Bullshit, the podcast about Israel Keys. And we've got Emily Nestor of Mile Marker 181, who talks about the death of Jalea Davis. And really, everyone who we're talking about on this panel has been on one of our shows. I don't think Marissa's been on Crawlspace, but the rest have. So go back through our archive. You can check it out on Stitcher Premium, or you can check it out just on the regular feed and listen to those episodes with Josh Hallmark and Emily Nestor. And it's going to be an amazing panel.
Well, you're talking about a who's who of the true crime podcast community, and it really reminds me of when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame puts all of the legendary stars on the stage and they all jam out. This is going to be an incredible conversation between everybody, and I can't wait until they're able to interact with the audience. So make sure you get there. Make sure you get down to the Wildwood Convention Center in Wildwood, New Jersey.
Get there. Go to AmericanCrimeFest.com and check it out. If you've ever wanted to start a crime podcast, well, this is a good starting place. You get to hear some true experts discuss what made their shows so popular.
And you know what? You were just saying, if you ever wanted to start a true crime podcast, this would be a good place. But if you want to get primed for that, why don't you head on over to the newly revamped Crawlspace Media website. It's crawlspace-media.com, and we have a list of all the shows that have joined our network. Most of them are going to be at the American Crime Fest. And if you want to talk to us about creating a show, or if you have a show and you just don't know what to do with it yet, we'd love to hear from you. So contact us and go to crawlspace-media.com.
All right, Lance, let's play this interview with Mike Morford to talk about David Berkowitz. But before we do, I just want to mention his victims because we don't really talk about the victims' names. We do discuss his victims, but don't actually name them. So I just want to make sure we name them here in the intro.
I think that's a great idea. We talk a lot about his crimes, and we talk a lot about the psychology behind it, and then a little bit on that conspiracy. And I remember we brought up a little bit, we have to remember that these are actual people there because he had a number of people who he attempted murder on who survived, and we need to make sure that those people are recognized as well.
So he stabbed Michelle Foreman Christmas Eve 1975. She survived. Donna Lauria was killed, but Jody Valenti survived.
And then next on October 23rd, and this is in 1976, the victims were Carl DeNaro and Rosemary Keenan. Both of those victims survived the attack, even though DeNaro was shot in the head. DeNaro later went on to work with investigators on possibly solving the Son of Sam crimes.
His next victims were Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lamino. They were 16 and 18 when they were shot on November 27th, 1976. Lamino was hit in the back and hospitalized and was ultimately paraplegic, and DeMasi was shot in the neck, though her wound was non-life-threatening.
On January 30th of 1977, Christine Frond and John Deal were shot. Frond was shot twice in the head and died several hours later, and Deal was the one who actually drove her to the hospital. He survived.
And on March 8th, 1977, Columbia University student Virginia Voskerichian was shot and killed. She was 19 years old.
In April 1977, Alexander Esau and Valentia Suriani were shot. Suriani died right at the scene, and Esau died at the hospital.
And then on June 26th, 1977, Sal Lupo and Judy Placido were shot. Both victims survived their injuries.
The last victims before his capture were Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Valenti, and Robert Valenti lost an eye, and Moskowitz died from her injuries.
And thanks to Wikipedia for the information. Okay, and here is Mike Morford with the interview. Welcome to Crawlspace, Mike Morford. How's it going?
It's going very well. How you guys doing?
We're doing very, very well, and I can tell, although I can't see you, I can tell that you are sipping out of your Crawlspace mug.
You got me. You busted me. But what am I drinking?
Probably some whiskey. And
Yeah, what does Mike Morford usually drink? Your normal concoction of banana milk and whiskey.
How'd you guess?
and grain alcohol.
And grain alcohol.
Nothing gets you up in the morning like some banana and whiskey mixed.
Nothing says I'm ready to start looking in and solving cold cases more than some Jack and Banana Wave.
How is that Crawlspace mug treating you?
I'm afraid to use it. I'm afraid if it breaks, I'll never see another one. So
Well, that is probably
it's up,
true.
It's up on the shelf and it's protected in like one of those giant bulletproof glass things like that they protect the Super Bowl trophy in.
Yeah, it's airtight.
It's in there. Exactly.
That makes sense.
It's
got little
hyperbolic
laser
chamber.
beams going towards it, like so nobody can break into my house and steal it.
Well, I will go in and try to steal the mug, and I will dodge those laser beams, a la Catherine Zeta-Jones style.
There you go. I'd like to see that. That would be fun to watch.
Well, your wish is my command.
Well, maybe we'll set that up at the American Crime Festival in Wildwood, New Jersey, November 9th and 10th, 2019.
Way to shoehorn the segue.
Thanks. Yeah, so Mike, you're coming to the American Crime Fest in Wildwood, New Jersey, November 8th, 9th, and 10th, 2019. It's going to be an absolute blast.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's right in my backyard, and that doesn't happen very often, so I was automatically in as soon as I heard it was there.
Well, when we were planning this with Jim and Nicole from PI Magazine and Unsolved Magazine, who are co-producers in this this convention, this expo, we said there's no other place that we should be doing this aside from Mike Morford's backyard. And they said,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were thinking too.
And if everybody wants to just come over to my house afterwards, we'll have a barbecue up back. You know, hopefully the weather's not too cold. We'll get the fire going and roast some marshmallows.
Nice. Oh, my God. Your backyard sounds great.
Marshmallows with Morph.
We're coming down.
It's a new show.
How far away are you from Wildwood?
I'm probably an hour or so.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, what street and house number are you?
We will be there Sunday afternoon, November 10th. We'll be watching football.
You're making me second guess putting that out there for the marshmallows.
It's too late. It's too late.
You recently covered a serial killer on your wonderful podcast, Criminology.
Yeah, we covered Son of Sam on episodes 73, 74, 75. So that was back in August. So it went well, and we went pretty deep. We started out the podcast doing deep dives and covered the Zodiac and the Golden State Killer, and there were people asking us to do some deep dives into some more serial killers, and that's one we always wanted to do, so we did that.
The people want more serial killers, Morph.
Yeah, I think people want to know what makes them tick and what drives them and why they do what they do. And I think for everyone that's not caught that escapes justice, it's always good to dive into the ones that are caught and see if you can figure out what's going on with them and what things they have to provide.
As far as the interesting inner workings of the mind of a serial killer, in recent history, where does the Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, rank in your unofficial rankings?
Well, that's tough. I mean, if you're looking for, disgusting values, something like that, you're
Lance is always looking for disgusting values.
Yeah, if it's disgusting or horrid or something like that, you're probably looking towards like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ed Gein or Gacy or somebody like that. I mean, if you're looking for somebody that drives down a street on a dark night and finds a couple people parked in a car and shoots them, I think Zodiac, because it's still unsolved, is right at the top. But Son of Sam, even though he was caught, I think he's number 2 in that category, because the way he had that big city terrorized for a year, it's mind-boggling.
Okay, so take us back to when all this started, and what prompted David Berkowitz to create this persona, the Son of Sam, and when did he start attempting violent crimes?
Well, going back to when the original Son of Sam crime started, it was really before they got linked. They just seemed like random attacks. Was in 1976, and then gradually from there they became a little bit more progressive and more often, and they spread through different areas of New York during the next year. And then eventually he called himself the Son of Sam in a letter that he mailed to Jimmy Breslin, who was a big reporter in New York. And up until that time, the press had dubbed him the 44 caliber killer, but evidently he didn't like that name, so he chose Son of Sam. But even before the shooting started, the attacks on couples, he had a history of small crimes, a lot of arsons that he claimed to have started. Some he may have, some it seems like he probably didn't. But something in his mind sort of was already wrong before he started murdering people, it seems.
Where did he get the name Son of Sam? I know that everyone says, he said that a dog was talking to him, or Satan was talking to him through a dog. Where does those specific names come from?
So he didn't really explain how he gave himself that name, but the person who owned the dog, his name was Sam Carr, and when he first confessed to these crimes, the whole thing came out about satanic worship, and he was getting these messages from this dog, and the dog's master was Sam. So it probably tied into that. But we also did an episode about the possible conspiracy in the case, that there were more people involved, and some of the conspiracy theorists that think there were more people involved think that Sam Carr's sons were involved in it, and so therefore you might have the name Son of Sam come from one of them. So it's an interesting case with lots of weird aspects, for sure.
Well, that is interesting. I hadn't heard that. And was that something that was actually investigated by the police, or was that something Berkowitz said, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so there's a book about it by an author named Maura Terry. And Maura Terry, if you go back and watch some of the Unsolved Mysteries episodes from the early 90s and late 80s, he was on there, I think, a couple different times saying that he thought there was a conspiracy theory. And if you look, and I think it's born of the idea that there were several sketches made of the different shooters, and a couple of them look like they're David Berkowitz. Obviously, they're at night. Witnesses can have varying degrees of success making a composite, but some of them look a lot like David Berkowitz, and some of them look nothing like David Berkowitz. Some of them it's a thin guy with stringy blonde hair. I don't know how you're going to confuse that for David Berkowitz, but so it started in that vein, I think. And then there were also instances where, when he got busted for a parking ticket on his car, he was seen by a witness a good 2 miles from a crime scene just minutes before it happened, and they don't think he could have gotten to the spot where the shooting happened in enough time to have done it. So some of this is what goes into the conspiracy theories by Maury Terry and by other people.
Oh boy, don't get me started on eyewitness testimony.
Yeah, it's obviously it's at night. People, their eyesight can play tricks on them. So you have to include some of that in the possibility of the sketches not matching. But then other sketches just are wildly different that look nothing like David Berkowitz. So
But that
you have to
happens
ask
all the
question.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some people think composite sketches can be a photograph. It's not an actual photograph. It's based on somebody's recollections, somebody's memory, and the artist's ability to relay that on paper, I guess.
So is part of the theory that Berkowitz worked with the others as part of a killing cult, or is it all just independent crimes?
So it's actually just what you mentioned, that he got involved in a satanic cult. This is a guy that's probably a bit of a incel, to plug one of your shows.
Thank you.
Check out Incel.
He wasn't successful with women. He was a loner, and he needed to fit in. And he found, according to him, he found some friends in a weird place, which was down in the gutters, so to speak, of New York City, where they would meet for satanic rituals and things like that. And reportedly there were dogs being sacrificed and things like that. Just some real dark stuff. And then eventually the plan to start killing humans was introduced, according to even Berkowitz. Even Berkowitz mentioned that at one point. Now, he's changed his story a couple times, so who knows if he's telling the truth and which part he's telling the truth about. But he definitely has said that there was some satanic activity, and others have verified some of those claims too.
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to say there's some satanic activity. You know what I mean?
Especially when you're arrested for murder and attempted murder. It's a pretty easy defense.
Literally, we could light a candle in here and say that we're doing some satanic activity, and we can talk to Satan or whatever we want to dream up as we sit here in the office. You know what I mean? Like if you're chanting or whatever and you call that satanic activity, that might be satanic activity for you, but it might be complete nonsense to most people.
Could be meditation to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, everybody's got the right to practice whatever religion they want, whether that's Christianity, Satanism, whatever. But I think if and when it crosses a line to killing people or animals, then if that's truly the case, then you've got something that's pretty big.
So when David Berkowitz started his violent crimes, he didn't originally use the .44 caliber. Is that accurate?
He actually stabbed somebody. He tried to stab a couple girls, and they both survived. And it was just a real random attack. But he was later given a gun by a friend of his, or a friend of his bought it on his behalf, and he started using the gun. And originally the shootings just seemed also very random. They didn't connect them. They were in different areas of the city, different jurisdictions, and it just seemed pretty random. But eventually they started seeing, hey, a .44 caliber is not real common, and we've got this random shooting and this random shooting, this random shooting, and eventually they put two and two together and connected that they were all involved with each other.
So they called him the .44 caliber killer when in the summer of 1976 in New York City, when he was terrorizing. And then he was later sort of dubbed the Son of Sam. You said that he didn't like the .44 caliber killer, and did he give himself the Son of Sam nickname?
Yeah, he wrote a letter to Jimmy Breslin, who was a big reporter in New York, and called himself the Son of Sam. And it was very reminiscent of Zodiac, with all this crazy writing and mystical, bizarre writing in it, these different claims. And he called, he mentions John Wheaties, the suffocator and murderer of young girls. And John Wheaties was the nickname of one of Sam's sons. getting back to that conspiracy theory for a second. So that's interesting if that's true, and that's what further feeds into some of those conspiracy theories.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? The Wheaties. So one of Sam's son's nickname was Wheaties?
Yeah, his name was John Wheaties Carr, and Wheaties was his nickname. But that's supposedly what they called him was John Wheaties. And in the letter, he says John Wheaties, the suffocator of murder of young girls. So it's pretty interesting. Could it be a coincidence, or could he be trying to frame that guy and make him look like, hey, somebody's going to recognize his nickname and try and link it to him? Who knows? But the interesting thing is that Sam Carr's sons both died in bizarre ways at a pretty young age. John Wheaties was killed in Idaho in a suicide, or what was apparently a suicide. And then his other brother was killed in a car accident in New York. So both of the brothers that were allegedly involved were killed not long after Berkowitz was arrested.
So Berkowitz alleged that they were involved because of the satanic cult activity that they did together, and this was his neighbor, right? So let me just back up here. So this was his neighbor's sons.
Yeah, the Sam guy, Sam Carr, lived half a block over, whatever, on the other side of it. His apartment building was Sam Carr's residence, and that's how he met these two brothers, was because he lived so close to them, and they're the ones that allegedly introduced him into the satanic cult.
And was John Carr, was it John Wheaties, did he actually suffocate young women like Berkowitz said?
There's no, as far as I know, there's no evidence, no proof of that. Although there, if going back to that Unsolved Mysteries episode, they talk in detail about these two brothers, and one of them was supposedly sacrificing a chicken on a friend's floor, and the friend walked into his house and went off on them because he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's got a big, like a pentastar drawn on his kitchen floor, and he's got a rooster or something in the middle of it that he's getting ready to sacrifice. And the friend wasn't too happy the friend wasn't too happy that he was doing this on his kitchen floor.
And that's a true story?
That, according to Maury Terry and the police out there, there's a police officer out there that started looking into it, and he wound up believing that there was some cult activity as well. And they thought the death of the suicide death, he shot himself in the head supposedly, and they thought that was it wasn't clearly an open and shut case of suicide. And there were supposedly Son of Sam insignias. One of the letters that Son of Sam wrote had a weird SOS symbol. But supposedly this brother's phone book there in Minot, North Dakota. Did I say Idaho first? I think it was North Dakota. But anyway, someplace out west. He wasn't living in New York at the time. But when they looked at the crime scene where he had killed himself, there was a phone book with one of these Son of Sam insignias on it, which jumped out to him.
That he drew, or it was just in the Minot phone book?
They don't know. It was I don't think they determined that. It was written on top of the phone book as far as I can remember. So that was something that sort of jumped out to them.
Okay, so let me reset here because this is a lot.
We are
okay. So the scumbag known as the 44 caliber killer is named David Berkowitz. He murdered 6 people in New York City, and he named himself the Son of Sam, which was after his neighbor, who actually had 2 sons, who apparently and allegedly they were involved in some kind of satanic cult activity together because I guess they lived in the same apartment building. And also, if I'm not mistaken, this is the family that had the dog too, right? That apparently was talking to Berkowitz.
That's all correct. And to touch on the dog talking to Berkowitz, at some point Berkowitz stated that he had made the talking dog part up to make investigators think he was insane, so he'd get off with after a period of time of being in a mental institution or whatever, he could get out. but he eventually told investigators about that being fake, which, again, and that may be correct, but also if you look at pictures of his apartment, he had some really bizarre writing and holes in the wall and everything else with messages written on the wall. So if he was trying to sell looking crazy, he did a pretty good job. But eventually he said that he had made that up to get a lighter sentence.
Right, but apparently what wasn't made up was the attempted sacrifice of a chicken on John Wheaties Carr's friend's floor, apparently. So there might be some, I guess, witness testimony to some satanic activity in some way. But again, I just want to go back to like sacrificing a chicken doesn't actually kill someone in the real life or in real world or anything like that. You're just killing a chicken. And so did Sam, the dad of these two kids and the dog, did he ever say that David hung out with his sons?
I don't know what their involvement was, if he confirmed that he knew him. That's something that wasn't clearly explained. I don't know. At some point, David Berkowitz tried to kill Sam Carr's dog and shot it, but he survived. And I know that Sam Carr was trying to figure out who did it. I don't know that he wound up suspecting David Berkowitz or not, but he was concerned that somebody had tried to kill his dog. And then it came to be that there was another person that lived in that apartment building that was a police officer. He, for some reason, I don't know how he came to suspect David Berkowitz had been the one that shot the dog, but he started thinking that he had shot the dog and was keeping a close eye on him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Berkowitz acted like a real weirdo in that apartment building. I mean, if you're up to that kind of activity, you're shooting dogs and actually killing people, like you're probably setting off radar to a cop or a detective.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing too to touch on, because I didn't say this, but it's probably important to anybody that believes in the conspiracy theory, and that is that there were 6 people killed and 7 people wounded in the shootings, the Son of Sam shootings. David Berkowitz only admits to pulling the trigger in some of those shootings. He said that he definitely did not shoot all of the people, and there were other people involved. He said that he had some role. He was there in the area either as a lookout or some kind of participant, but he didn't pull the trigger in all those crimes.
Right. He was only convicted of 2 counts. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was convicted of the Moskowitz shootings, and the Bobby Violante shootings, if I remember correctly. And I think actually the way they did it. Now this is a little bit of you almost have a whole episode set aside to explain this, but essentially what they did was they brought in, because these were in the different jurisdictions within New York. You're talking the Bronx, Brooklyn, all these different areas. So what they did was they had judges come in from each of the shooting jurisdictions and essentially pass a judgment on Berkowitz for each crime. But back then, the way I understand it is they couldn't, you wouldn't get more than 1 life sentence because you've only got 1 life is the way they looked at it. So it wasn't like you're sentenced to life 10 times. They just essentially made 1 big life sentence. They charged him with a couple of the murders and made 1 giant life sentence as opposed to a whole bunch of different life sentences. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was his intelligence like?
I always thought before I really looked in the case, I thought he wasn't that bright, but he was. He had a pretty good IQ. I forget what number his IQ was, but he was pretty smart. But again, going back all the way to his childhood, he was adopted, and his adopted parents told him that his mom was dead. He found out that his mom had an affair with somebody, and that's how she got pregnant, and she gave him up for adoption. So he's got all these things going on in his mind. He went to serve in the military, and while he was doing his duty in the military, he had his first and only supposedly sexual experience with a prostitute, and he caught VD. So, he just wasn't lucky in what he was doing. And I think it was all sort of piling on him and compounding whatever issues he had. But he was actually pretty smart.
And he obviously was inspired by the crimes of the Zodiac and the media attention that string of murders received, because he did something very similar. Like you said, he reached out to the press and to the police and, called himself Mr. Monster and Beelzebub and said that he was on the hunt to drink blood. Like, I mean, over the top type monster characteristics there. Do you think that his violent streak was motivated by his need to be recognized for something?
I think that would be fair to say. I think a lot those killers like Zodiac or Berkowitz, they don't get attention in their everyday life, and they seek it through the acts. But then they figure out, hey, rather than just get a mention of a shooting, in tonight's paper, I can actually send a letter and really sell it and go over the top with this bizarre thing. And I know they'll print that on the front page. And sure enough, the New York Times was printing Son of Sam stuff every day. They were in a panic, and they were putting his letters on the front page. So, for somebody like the Zodiac, the killing became a backstory. He sort of went away from that and went to all letter writing, because he said, I don't even have to kill anybody, and I could just write letters and get attention. So I don't know if Berkowitz wasn't caught. Maybe Berkowitz would have done the same thing, and he would have stopped being involved in shootings and just started writing letters threatening to shoot more people, and they still would have been printing it.
Yeah, I feel like his decision to move on from a knife to a gun sort of speaks to his maybe not so much like his weak stomach for it, but there's a whole lot of bravado in his letters, and I feel like he started with the knife, and it was probably too close for him,
Too personal.
Yeah, so then a gun, and even like messing around with some arson here and there. That's very much like you can take a step back and you can do the business and then move on to your self promotion without getting literal blood on your hands.
Yeah, and I think it's just a more effective way. If initially his plan was to kill people and get attention, he'd have a more efficient time doing that with a gun, because the first two people he attacked with a knife survived. So I think he said, all right, I need to step my game up and use a gun so I can actually kill some people and get some headlines that way. And that's what he did.
Nice. Get a job.
What about I sorry to go back to the actual Sons of Sam,
right,
but
that's something that just kind of gets lost in the shuffle when people talk about this. Like, there were actual Sons of Sam,
right,
that were apparently not good people.
Apparently, So I don't know what how old were they?
I think if I remember correctly, I want to say they were in their late 20s, early 30s.
Okay, so it wasn't that bizarre for Berkowitz to be hanging out with them.
No, they were in his age range.
Okay.
Because I think he was in his mid-20s when the Son of Sam shootings were happening.
Yeah, so they might have actually been a little older than him.
Yeah, around the same age, slightly older.
I'm starting to believe this conspiracy theory, Morph. How dare you?
Again, it's something we wanted to address in the show, and we're not trying to sell the conspiracy or
well, you sold me.
There's some unanswered questions. As a matter of fact, this is the odd thing that people don't know, is that after David Berkowitz was convicted and sentenced to prison, you would think, all right, everything's over, everything's done. One of the district attorneys in one of the jurisdictions opened up the case again, asking for people to come forward, because one thing that sort of got mixed up in the shuffle is, David Berkowitz was known to own this big white car, and that's what he got ticketed with the night that he was busted, and they put two and two together, and that ultimately brought him down. But there was a big white car that he drove, but in a couple of the crime scenes there were yellow Volkswagen Bugs witnessed, and one of the incidents it took off ran a stop sign, almost caused an accident, and they got a partial plate on it, but they were never able to identify the driver. So one of these jurisdictions, after Berkowitz was in jail and convicted, opened up the case and asked for information, trying to find out more about the person in the yellow Volkswagen. And they were shut down and told to close the investigation, and it never went anywhere. So they started out looking for that car, and just when they caught Berkowitz, they never looked into it anymore. So it makes you wonder, could there be somebody involved? Is there somebody else out there that had some kind of role in this that got away with it?
I thought you were going to say that the Sons of Sam drove a yellow Volkswagen.
Well, so this is the interesting part. Now, in our coverage, in our 3-part coverage on criminology, we had a surviving victim, Carl Denara, his name is, and he was one of the earliest Son of Sam victims. He survived, luckily, but he had severe head injuries. But after he healed up, he met Terry, the author, and they started a friendship, and eventually he started helping him sort of investigate for his book. And before you know it, he became a believer that there was a conspiracy theory. So this is one of the Son of Sam victims that believes there's some kind of involvement of other people. And he said that they confirmed that in the days leading up to some of the shootings, they would see a yellow Volkswagen Bug in the Carr's driveway.
And that was coming from Carl Denaro, who survived one of the attacks along with Rosemary Keenan. That's the person you're talking about?
Yes.
And he says that he recalls now that there were a Volkswagen, a yellow Volkswagen, in the vicinity before the attack.
Not him in his particular shooting, but in his research, joining Maury Terry to do research, they uncovered details of witnesses that saw a yellow Volkswagen at some of the crime scenes, and a yellow Volkswagen parked in the Carr driveway before the murders. And
That's incredible.
After Berkowitz was arrested, that car supposedly wasn't seen at the Carr residence anymore.
Alternate theory. The 60s had just happened. Hippies, Volkswagen Bugs.
Very popular car.
Yellow, very popular car. It might have been a very popular color, too, for all we know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Volkswagen Bugs were, we all know, it was popular back then. So if you see one, that color pops, you see it, it's easy to see, it's going to catch your attention. So could it have been something, an innocent explanation? Sure. But what's interesting is, as much as they were pushing trying to find that car, and even with a partial plate, they never did find the owner or the driver, and that person never came forward either.
Damn. I mean, when you're looking into David Berkowitz's crimes, he really played the part. I am getting back on this topic. He really played the part of this monster just in just preliminary, surface level research. He would speak to his victims in a high-pitched voice before pulling the gun out. And, I mean, he really wanted himself to be portrayed as this monster. I'm trying to, somehow connect, how what's that called, psychologically? Because you can put that much effort into anything else, if he wanted to be a writer. He could put that effort into that. And it doesn't sound like he had that bad of a childhood. I mean, he was adopted. He had some dysfunction there, but
I said the adopted thing seems to come up a lot in serial killers. Have you found that? You found that, Mike?
Yeah, I've heard it definitely a few times. I do hear of childhood. I don't want to call them abnormalities, because there's plenty of normal kids that have issues when they're young that don't grow up to be serial killers. But there are certain things that people have seized on and said, hey, this seems pretty common with children, and sometimes adoption is one of those things. But again, he didn't know until he was older that he was adopted and that his mom had given up on him, and he had a stable home with his adopted family. So he can't, I don't know how he could technically blame that on anything to do with his childhood, because by all accounts he had as normal childhood as you could have.
And has he, just to be clear, has he ever blamed it on his childhood, or is that just something that people try to make the connection?
No, I don't think he ever did. I don't think he ever blamed it on there. And it's interesting because at different times following him being captured, I mean, it started off as, hey, I was hearing these voices from this dog telling me to go out and kill. And then it was, okay, you got me, I made that up, but that didn't really happen. Then later on, he's like, I was part of the satanic cult, and we went out and murdered people, and I pulled the trigger on a couple of the crimes, but not all of them. There were other people involved. And now today, all these years later, he's almost completely left that entire crime series behind him, and almost doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Now he's a born-again Christian, and he says, I want to focus on being a good Christian and leave all that stuff behind. So almost done a complete 180, because he doesn't talk about that part of his life anymore.
Well, that's something that's interesting to me as well, is that he went to prison. He was given a Bible, and he read a passage in the Bible, and it inspired him to be born again. And I don't want to be called the son of Sam anymore. I'm now the son of hope. And he becomes a prison evangelist. Is that just part of the act too? Does David Berkowitz just not know who he is? Is that, the son of Sam was an act. It was a violent act, and this is an act of good. Does he just want to be a celebrity because he doesn't have an identity?
I don't know. I don't think any of us really know what's going on in somebody's head, especially somebody like David Berkowitz. So, is he remorseful? Does he truly regret what he did, and he just really wants to move on with what he believes is the right path from here on out? I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to get out of prison. He's actually, from what I understand, he's actually said that he doesn't want to do any more parole hearings because he doesn't think he should be released. So maybe he does really believe that he deserves to pay for what he did. I don't know.
Well, they also enacted the Son of Sam law, which was the law that prevents people who've committed crimes from profiting on their crimes. Is that something that is still in existence today? Wasn't there something about the book Wise Guy, which was made into Goodfellas, and they ended up saying that it was constitutionally they pulled the law back because it was unconstitutional? Or was that just for that case?
I remember hearing something about the Wise Guy thing. I don't know all the details, but I remember hearing something about that. But the Son of Sam law it's called the Son of Sam law because it had to do specifically with Berkowitz's case, because his father was sort of taking over his finances and his the right to sign deals for him, quote unquote deals, because he felt, and he told people, that I think there's going to be some book deals or movie deals coming his way, and I want to be in charge of it. And that's one of the reasons they stepped in and made that law, so that a killer or his estate couldn't profit from their crimes.
And when you said his father stepped in, you're talking about his father, Sam Hain, the Druid Devil.
No, his adopted father.
Ah, okay.
not that father.
Okay, just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, being reborn as an incarcerated killer feels a little cliche to me.
And doesn't it feel safe too? Like if he's this evangelist in prison, it almost protects him from any sort of prison violence amongst inmates.
Yeah, you can kind of become a leader in that way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably want to be good at that point. Maybe. I don't really know. I haven't been to prison, but I'm looking at his...
Stop it. You're hard.
I am hardened by the podcast prison. But I'm looking at his timeline here that I just wrote down from this conversation. So he was adopted. He had done some arson or committed arson at one point. Do you know when he committed that arson?
I think it was when he was a teenager. He formed, I don't want to call it a volunteer fire company, but him and some, I guess, teenage friends formed some kind of, like a neighborhood watch, but for fire fighting. They would look out for fires and try and, if there was a fire that broke out, they would try and deal with them until the actual fire department got there. But here it was, he was setting some of these fires. And,
yeah. And
he actually had a log of all these fires that he supposedly started. There were hundreds of them, if I recall correctly. But the authorities came to believe, I don't know why, maybe they found out he was in different areas. They came to believe that he couldn't have started all of them. So for some reason, he put fires in that he claimed were ones he started when they actually weren't.
Man, so he was plagiarizing crimes.
Yeah. Plagiarizing arsons. Doesn't everybody do that?
That's very bizarre.
I guess if you want to be successful in your particular field.
I mean, that's kind of one of those markers, too, that we see that's common in young serial killers or people who turn out to be serial killers is lighting fires. Military happens to come up occasionally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure getting VD from a prostitute didn't help his mental state.
Or his appreciation of women.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting laid for one time, and you can come away with VD. It's gonna probably rub you the wrong way.
Well, I say
No
get back
pun
on the
intended.
horse. Get back on the horse and keep trying.
Well,
but
I don't know. Short of him paying for it, I don't know that he was very successful with getting any women. That was part of his issue, I think.
Well,
He's very lonely, and he said in one of the interviews with Maury Terry, I was very lonely. I was shy. I was introverted. I was awkward, and this cult, they weren't judgmental. They welcomed me in, and that's the kind of people that cults usually look for, the outcasts, the people that don't fit in anywhere else. Exactly.
Now, when you say cult, you're referring to the military, when you went to the army, right?
Hey-o.
I'm on fire. No, I'm not. Well, he's not. I mean, if this was Major League Baseball, he'd be sent back down to the minors. I mean, his record is 6-7. If you're a pitcher, like, you need to work on your craft a little bit. Do you think that bothered him, that he was so unsuccessful
As a fire starter?
as a murderer?
I don't know. I don't know. He even details in some of his comments. He said that the first time he shot that gun, and 44's got a pretty good kick. The first time he shot with one hand, and shoot that kind of gun with one hand, you're going to get some serious recoil. And he was shooting from a pretty good distance, 15, 20 feet away from cars at some instances. So I can see him just not being accurate. But as he went along and did some of the next shootings, he would get in a shooting stance, feet out to the sides to get some balance, and both hands, one hand supporting his shooting hand, and get a little bit closer to the car. So that combined to make the shootings more deadly after that.
Oh, man. Well, what I don't want to get lost in this whole thing is that, he had actual victims. We often make light of these moments, these violent moments in history.
Yeah, you don't want to glorify the killer, but
yeah, and you don't want
it's a common topic.
Yes, exactly. But you don't want to forget that there are victims there, and it's just a defense mechanism, really, to make some light of his life, just to get by and not go insane. So yeah, I mean, he did effectively murder 6 people, and were all of these 6 people young couples in cars that were completely defenseless?
Yeah, they were all young people, and some of them were walking on the street. One girl she was carrying her books, and he came out of the shadows and pointed a gun at her, and she instinctively raised her books up in front of her face, and he shot her right through the books. Right in the head. So, I mean, very, very sad. These were all young people with futures ahead of them, and the only saving thing here was that 7 of the 13 people survived, but some of them are scarred for life or are paralyzed. So even though they survived the actual shooting, they've been left with lifelong problems.
He's only 66.
Yeah, he was young when it happened, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty young.
And where is he incarcerated?
He's in upstate New York. I forget the name of the prison, but he's still in New York, still in upstate New York. And
I think you're lying. I think you know the name of the prison, and I think you have an interview lined up with him.
Have you visited him?
I think you guys should send Chris Dewitt to go over there and to take a shot at getting him.
Thanks for the cross promotion. Of course, you're talking about another Crawlspace media podcast called Criminal Perspective. Check that one out, where they talk to killers.
Yeah, if anybody can get a hold of him and get him talking, it might be them.
Yeah, good point. Even if they get him to talk about his reborn Christian life, I think that would be kind of interesting, but I don't know. It's just all cliches to me. I'm
but
kind of bored of him, the person, to be honest.
Yeah, but do you think that those cliches were just bored of him because it's 2019? I mean, I'm saying
no, I think you hit it.
He started the cliches.
Yeah,
him and Zodiac.
Yeah, you hit it when you said he just wanted to be famous. I think that's a terrible way to go about trying to get that goal.
And I think and if I can make this comparison, I think it's sort of changed a little bit to, I think most serial killers now, they don't want to be serial killers for attention. They want to be serial killers because they're just warped. They're disturbed. I think it seems that there's been a crossover to mass shootings now for people that want their 15 minutes of fame. I'm going to take out as much people as they can, and people are going to talk about me. I'm going to be all over the news and blah blah blah. They're going to look into my life. It's mind-boggling that they think that way, but it seems like that sort of replaced the how can I get famous and get my 15 minutes.
I think you're right. It's a little quicker. Yeah, a little less research or
prep.
Yeah.
Now, what do you make of his last words as a killer when he was arrested? So his first words to police. I'm sure you're familiar with what he said, and also he said pretty early on that there were other sons out there. God help the world. What do you make of that? And maybe it's just an opinion question.
I don't know. I wrestle with, by other sons, does he mean other disturbed people like him, or does he mean other sons that were involved in the shootings with him? I don't really know what he meant by that, but either way, it's interesting. We know there's other Son of Sam types out there. That's easy to understand. But what makes me think is was there anybody else in his little clique or in his circle that might have been involved in the murders that he's accused of committing?
And what do you make of his words to the police when he was arrested? Because didn't he say something along the lines of "What took you so long"?
Yeah, essentially, he was just very nonchalant, and I think he knew that he would eventually be caught. I think that probably realized, and again, if he had this whole story about talking dogs made up and everything else, maybe he's saying, okay, I know at some point I'll be caught. I'll just say I'm crazy. I'll make up all this shit about talking dogs, and I'll go to the hospital for 5 years or something, and they'll let me out. I don't know what he was thinking, but he was very nonchalant about it, and almost as if he expected them to come at any day.
Now, I made the comment about him becoming a born again and being an evangelist in prison. He was, and I made the comment that he did this because he probably felt that he could be protected if he, had that position of power and influence. He was actually attacked in prison early on, right?
Yeah, he was actually, his throat was slashed, but he survived and had to get a bunch of stitches. But the person that did it was obviously somebody that wanted to kill the infamous Son of Sam to get some prison cred, I guess, to build up his resume in prison. And for a long time, they didn't release the name of the person that did it, but they eventually did release the name. And I forget the guy's name. I think he died recently.
Oh, I thought we were going to have a Crawlspace exclusive.
No, it doesn't look like it.
Well, that's interesting. And after that, he becomes I don't know, how long after that did he become a born again?
I don't think he found, I remember him talking back in, I want to say the late 80s, early 90s, and I don't know that he was a Christian at that point. I want to say sometime it was in the mid to late 90s that he started claiming to be a born-again Christian, and really...
He became the Son of Hope.
Yeah, after you realize that cult leaders can get a following and get admiration.
Yeah, and he's probably not going to get his throat slashed again.
What a dick.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And supposedly there's never been a Son of Sam movie made, which I think would be, if they did it tastefully and did it like they did Zodiac, for example, I think would be a great movie to watch. There's never been a movie really made based on the actual crimes. There was Summer of Sam by Spike Lee.
That's right.
That was just Son of Sam sort of in the background, but David Berkowitz was allegedly very upset by that movie. He felt that it was just he felt that it glorified what he had done. He was very upset and thought it was in bad taste. So,
how did he get to watch that movie?
I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know the details behind that.
I'm
maybe
sure
somebody
they showed it.
Gave him a script or something. Who knows? He may have had some kind of access to watch it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was supposedly very upset with it.
Well, they can watch movies. And I'm sure if a popular movie is made about someone in the prison, probably everyone in the prison watches it.
They probably had like premiere night.
They really, probably do.
Right.
Something like that, yeah.
Wow. And he was also profiled by John Douglas.
Oh, cool.
At one point. And John
Douglas...
And he's
actually... You're mentioning John Douglas. They actually talk about the John Douglas interactions with him on this season of Mindhunter.
Oh.
Another Crawlspace produced show. Thanks for the plug.
Not true.
Not yet. You guys are taking over everything.
But we
I'm
love
sure.
it. Yeah.
And he said that he's convinced that he acted alone, right?
Yeah, and that's where, they didn't really, Son of Sam, or David Berkowitz, I should say, didn't, when he talked with those agents, he wasn't really talking conspiracy theory or other people involved. He was more or less telling them, okay, I didn't hear voices, or was no talking dog. I did it to get this sentence of being insane so I could get out sooner. It wasn't until after that he actually started saying there was other people involved.
Well, you've taken us to a whole new realm with the Son of Sam conversation. The whole conspiracy, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Morph, for opening our minds and joining us here on Crawlspace for this episode.
And speaking of opening things, open up that case that that airtight case that you're holding the Crawlspace mug in.
Yeah.
Let that thing out of prison.
Yeah. Pop some coffee in there.
Yeah, I might have to do a little video of it. I'll do a little video of I'll turn the security alarm off so the red lasers aren't shining all over, and I'll take a little video of it.
Little do you know, I've already snuck into your place and stolen it.
Oh my God!
And I'm going to give it back to you at the American Crime Fest
In Wildwood, New Jersey.
What do I win when I come on your show for the 10th time? I got to be approaching that. There must be something. It's a new car, right?
It's a robe. A robe that has
robe.
the Crawlspace insignia.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you get the car comes on the 20th appearance.
Oh, the 20th. Okay.
And wait till you see what kind of car it is. It's a yellow VW Bug.
Hey.
Oh, there you go.
Well, thank you, Morph, for joining us. We're really excited about the panel that you're going to be a part of. It is called How to Create and Maintain a Popular Crime Podcast. You're going to be doing that with Marissa Jones of The Vanish, with Captain of True Crime Garage, with Josh Hallmark of True Crime Bullshit, and with Emily Nestor of Mile Marker 181. So a who's who. That's going to be a great panel.
That's a lot of pressure put me up there with those superstars. I don't know if I'm going to be able to.
Well,
We'll have to hit the bar before we go on there.
California Pizza Kitchen.
CPK.
There we go.
You sat up there at ASOC with myself, Tim, and John Lorden right after Aphrodite Jones basically eviscerated the True Crime podcast community. Just kidding, she didn't. But and you did just fine up there, and that was after a long night and morning of drinking, and you did just fine.
We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it will be, and I'm just kidding. Mike Morford is not a. He's not a hardcore crazy drinker.
I'm pretty sure he texted us that morning being like, where are you guys? Well, thank you very much, Morph. We appreciate it. And check out Criminology, especially your series on Son of Sam, but really every episode is wonderful.
And what do you got coming up? I mean, are we doing another serial killer? Are you doing, what do you got coming up?
We mix it up. We just had an episode out about a guy that's playing citizen detective, a couch detective, and the case he's trying to solve is his own unsolved murder. His name's Terry Nera. So that was a very interesting case, and we've got some other ones coming up with, I don't want to give too much away, but we've got some interesting cases coming up.